Song's called 10,000 Reasons. I was thinking between lessons and instruments, I'm going to call that song $10,000. You probably have seen some of the news lately about how COVID rates are apparently on the increase. And while that is the case, it does seem, and I'm not making light at all of this, but it does seem that as people are getting COVID and more cases are appearing, that what people are experiencing, the level of sickness, is seemingly fairly mild. That doesn't mean that some people aren't feeling bad, but the instances of severe illness and people having to go to the hospital, that seems to be decreasing. And what people are experiencing is that they have other comorbidities. If they're in bad health and they get COVID, then it's going to be worse for them. So anyway, in the scheme of things, it is positive over time that this thing is weakening. But it's interesting as we think back to what it was like when all of this started. And back in March of 2018, March of 2020, it feels like 2018, but back in March of 2020, when everything kind of started in earnest, and then everything stopped. And you remember it was 2 weeks to stop the curve, and that's been, I don't know, anyway. So everything shuts down. You have so many stores that close. You have shortages of toilet paper and paper towels. Those are the good old days. And you had, the gas was cheap. You remember that? Gas was like $1.25, so... Anyway, but you had all that stuff that was going on, and masks everywhere, and hand sanitizer by the truckload, and we're just so much fear that we're operating in, and over and over and over and over again. One of the things that you were hearing were that there are symptoms to COVID. And so, for example, with COVID, one of the things that you could have is that you might have nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Or you could have a stomach bug. You may have a cough and some congestion, or you may have a nondescript virus. You may have a bad headache, but then it could be that your blood pressure's high, or you just have some allergy issues or some other nondescript virus. You could have all of these symptoms, all of these things that you could experience, or it could be a cold, or it could be just kind of nothing, right? You remember all that? And so that stunk, because it's like, what are the symptoms of COVID? Everything. Does something bothering you? Well, you could have COVID. Now, that being said, one of the things that was beneficial is this. At least in the earlier versions of the virus, there were some telltale signs that if someone had, that was a pretty strong indicator, hey, you've got COVID. Remember what it was? Loss of taste and smell. Now, some of you never had any taste, so it was a little more difficult, but loss of taste and smell. And so I remember, for example, last fall when we got it, and it was remarkable. You could smell, you could taste absolutely nothing. And the nice thing is, it was kind of helpful to have some classic symptoms, some hallmark symptoms that you could say, oh, this is COVID, as opposed to something else. Because it is nice when there are some classic symptoms to let you know that you actually have a problem. Now hold that thought for a second. We have been, for the past number of weeks, in a series that we're calling Here Are Your Idols. And the premise of it is this. You can be seated here in the sanctuary of a Christian church. You could be watching online, watching a message of a Christian church, and it may be also that you would say, hey, I am a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and I believe all that Bible stuff, I accept all this Jesus stuff, I'm with you on that, I'm part of the team. It is possible that could be true of you, and where you could say that I am a follower of God, yet at the same time, it is possible that you have given His ultimate place in your life to someone or something else. And what we've been looking at are some of the something else's. Now, last week we talked about that for many, unfortunately, they have replaced God, or they have ceded God's place to science. Today we're going to think about something else, though, that maybe is a little more difficult sometimes to identify, and that's this: family. It's possible that you have given God's place in your life not to something bad, but you've given it to family. Well, how can you tell if that's the case? Now, wouldn't it be nice if there were some telltale signs? Well, unfortunately, it's not simply a matter of seeing if you have a fever or if you have some congestion. So what are the symptoms of this? How can you tell if this might be something that possibly could have been and maybe even still is tripping you up? Well, I believe there are some questions that Jesus gave us. Questions that when we ask them can help us identify whether or not we have ceded His place in our lives, perhaps even to our families. What are those questions? Look with me in your Bibles today to Matthew chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10, and we're going to just look at a couple of verses. Matthew chapter 10, starting with verse 37. Jesus is talking here, and He says, "The one who loves a father or mother than me is not worthy of me. The one who loves a son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever doesn't take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me." In just those statements, I believe Jesus gives us some questions that will give us classic symptoms to let us know whether or not we have given ultimately what is His place, perhaps even to our families. And here's the first question: who do I love most? Who do I love most? Now, what we have seen here obviously has context, and it's a little more broad than just the immediate couple of verses. In fact, if you go back to the beginning of this chapter, you maybe even see the subject heading where it says commissioning the 12. Jesus is getting ready to send out the disciples to do some ministry in His absence. And so as He is preparing them, He's telling them some of the things that they are going to be doing, some of the jobs that they are going to be tasked with. He describes for them how their needs are to be met and what resources are going to be available to take care of all of this. And as he does this, He warns them, and He says in verse 14, "If anyone does not welcome you or listen to your words." So He's preparing them for the fact that it is not simply likely or possible, but it is going to happen that there are those that are not going to respond well to who you are as a person, but ultimately as a follower of me. And He further sets the stage starting in verse 16 where He describes, He says, "I'm sending you out like sheep among the wolves. And as one of my followers, you are going into hostile territory. And there are people that are going to be opposed to you, not because they don't like your name, not because they don't like where you're from, not because they don't like the schools that you attended, but because they don't like me, and you are connected with me." And so He describes that there's going to be some persecution. There is going to be real and pronounced pushback that they experience. In fact, He describes even how this might occur within the family, where He describes in verse 21, "But brother will betray brother to death, and the father his child." And as He's saying all that, He cautions them in verse 26. He says, "Listen, don't be afraid of them." So I've just shared with you some bad news. I've just shared with you that there's not simply the possibility, but the likelihood of persecution and pushback. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. He says, there's nothing covered that won't be uncovered, nothing hidden that won't be made known. And what He's trying to describe is this. You may find yourself in a circumstance, you may find yourself in a place where you're like, "Hey God, where are you?" And Jesus is saying, there's nothing that you're going to experience that He does not know. And He describes how that God even knows what's going on with sparrows, that one of them doesn't fall to the ground without God's knowledge. And He says, with you, even the hairs of your head are numbered. He knows that level of detail about you. So as one of His followers, whatever opposition and pushback, whatever persecution you experience in whatever degree, as one of His followers, don't be surprised that it comes, but don't be afraid of when it comes, because He says that He is greater and that He knows what's going on, and He has not abandoned you. And so with all of that said, that leads you to what He describes starting in verse 32, where He's communicating ultimately the nature of what having a relationship with Jesus looks like. And too many times what has occurred is that having a relationship with Jesus has been reduced to something that it is not. Too many times the notion of having a relationship with Jesus has been reduced to raising a hand or to winking an eye or to nodding a head or to repeating some series of phrases. And yes, it is the case that following Jesus involves me believing some things, but it involves believing some things to this degree where He says, where he talks about taking up our cross and following him. At the end of the day, Jesus has always been interested in having those that are in relationship with him that are following him. All right, so as you take all of those individual pieces and you start to develop a flow of thought that Jesus is describing, and as one that's in connection, in relationship with him, it is likely that you're going to experience some pushback. And it's possible, based on what we saw starting in verse 37, that pushback could even come in the family. In fact, back up just a little bit. In verse 34, he says this, "Don't assume that I come to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." You're like, wait a minute, I thought Jesus was the Prince of Peace, and here he's talking about, I came to bring a sword? What's the meaning of that? Well, the meaning of it is this, that Jesus came, and his ultimate purpose was to cause people and to call people into a relationship with him. That Jesus' ultimate aim is to cause people who are separated from God to be united with God. And if and when that happens, because of the work of Jesus, being at peace with God may put you at odds with someone else. Being at peace with God may create some division between you and someone else, and Jesus says that division might even include your family. Such that if you are really following me, it's possible that some of the closest relationships on earth, talks about father and mother, son or daughter. In verse 35, he talks about daughter-in-laws and mother-in-laws. Man's enemies becoming members of his own household. Jesus is communicating a principle, which is this, that my relationship with him is to be the primary relationship, including even that I have with family members. And if I am one of his followers, it is possible that there could be those in my family that I wish and would love that they're headed down the same path with me, but it's possible that if they veer away, if they do not join me on this, it's possible that we may be divided over Jesus, and I have to decide whether or not I'm going to be sticking with them or whether I'm going to be sticking with Jesus. And if he has the place that he is supposed to have in my life, well then, based on this, there's something that I should do. So how can I tell whether or not he's got the place that he should have in my life or not? He starts by saying, whoever loves a father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And if you love a son or daughter more than me, you're not worthy of me. That language there might be abrasive a bit to you, because probably when you think about your parents or you think about your children, you're thinking about some of those that are the dearest on earth to you. You're thinking about people that if push came to shove, you would give your life for, that you would trade places with for their ultimate well-being. And Jesus is saying, as much as you love them, as much as it is that you care for them, I expect that you are to love me more. Understand that this is not whatsoever a call to indifference. This is not a call to apathy towards your family. That Jesus is not saying don't love your family. In fact, he's not saying to not love your family a lot, because what we see in the whole of Scripture is this, that the primary relationship outside of a relationship with God is to be with our family. You know, Paul described that a man that won't take care of his own family, a man that won't take care of his own household, he may be doing great things in the church, but if he's not taking care of his own family, he's worse, Paul says, than an infidel, worse than an unbeliever. When God gave the 10 Commandments, one of the big 10 rules that he was going to give involved what? The relationship between a parent and their children, that children are to honor their mother and the father, and that's rooted in an experience of and a feeling of deep and abiding love for them. Jesus described that within the context of a family, that a husband is to love his wife in such a way that's reflective of Christ's love for the church, that it's sacrificial love. It's willing to lay your life down. It's willing to pay any price for your spouse's ultimate good. So hear me in this. The Bible is saying you had better love your family. Jesus is not suggesting that you shouldn't. But he does say this, whoever, the one that loves a father or mother more than me, he says they're not worthy of me. The one that loves a son or a daughter, which you should do. But if you don't love me more, he says you're not worthy of me. There is no sense in which I should feel anything other than love for my family, yet this love is to have boundaries such that the deepest affection that I have, that is reserved for God, and I don't put anything in its place. What does this look like? Coming up in October, Caroline and I will have our 18th wedding anniversary, and I believe it sincerely is the case that, and those of you who have been married much longer might testify in the same way, that you love your spouse more today than you did then. Why? Because there's more that you know. There's more shared experiences. The relationship has grown and matured. And so there's all of these things that are true now that weren't true then just because the relationship was so new. But I think about what it was like when we were dating. And I mean, everything happened quick. We met in February, were engaged in April, and married in October. And nobody was pregnant. Let's be very clear. Anyway, but I'm telling you, those early days, man, they were fun. It was and those of you, especially if you've been married a long time, or those that are early on in a relationship, I'm telling you, the beginning of a relationship, it is a ton of fun, isn't it? It just is. And the excitement, the enthusiasm, and it is so much fun. And sometimes you'll hear couples talking about, man, I wish we could kind of take things back so that I could feel what it felt like then. But to be honest with you, I don't want that. I really don't, because that was exhausting. And I don't know about you, it's a wonder I got anything done. I mean, it really is. I probably should have been fired there, because all I could think about was Caroline, about the next time I would see her, about the next time I would talk to her, about the next time she would beg me to go out with her again. And you think about all the warm fuzz and like the butterflies, and like, I'm going to hold her hand. I'm going to show her what a real kiss is like. In the love of the Lord. Man, that was so much fun. It just is. But in those early days, as consumed as I was in thinking about her, as excited as I was to spend time with her, as much as it was I was positively distracted by her. If you would have said to me this point, early on in the relationship, Michael, there's this girl that you are seeing, there's Caroline, and then there's your mother and your father. You can have a relationship with her, or you can have a relationship with them. But early on, I would have had to say, I would have a relationship with my parents. And because I love them in a way that, at least at that point, I don't love her. That those feelings have not yet been developed. They have not matured. But I have this deep and abiding love for my mom and for my dad. Now, fast forward to where we are today. What is the case is that the love that I have for my mom has not decreased. The love that I had for my father until his passing did not diminish whatsoever. But one of the things that has changed is that my feelings for Caroline have deepened such that she is the primary relationship that I have on earth. And there is this spot in my heart, there is this spot in my life. It is a reserved spot for my wife, and that's right up here. And parents, as much as I love them, that's beneath that. And I don't allow anything else into her spot. That's her place. And that's tops among people on earth. Listen, it is that same thought I believe that Jesus is seeking to communicate here, that there is a spot, if you think about it like a parking lot, there is a spot in your heart that is ultimately in the heart of everybody that is reserved for God. And it is to be the best parking spot. It is to be the top place. And it doesn't mean that you don't love and love deeply and meaningfully your spouse and your kids and your parents and your siblings and all of these other people. You absolutely love them and you sacrifice for them and you pray for them and you love them and you do all of these things. But the top spot, you decide, you know what? There is no one that I'm going to possess affection deeper for than God. That's His spot and no one else's. Now here's the challenge. How can you tell if you love Him to that degree? Can you go to AutoZone this afternoon and say, hey, do you have some sort of gauge I can like blow into maybe and to like show pressure to say that whether I love Jesus the way I should, whether I have given my family His spot or not? Because Jesus says, He's given me this question, who do I love most? Well, I'd like to say that it's Him, but maybe it's not, so how can I tell? That leads us to our second question, and that's this. With whom will I stand? With whom will I stand? In verse 38, Jesus says, whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. And we could spend a lot of time unpacking this language, talking about taking up your cross. But let me just kind of summarize as best I can what I believe Jesus is communicating here. That the life of following Him is one where I have to regularly say no. I have to regularly say no to things that otherwise I may want to do. I may have to say that this is Michael's dream, this is Michael's interest, but this is God's plan. This is what God wants. And so I'm going to say no to Michael because I'm going to be saying yes to him. This may be what other people want, but I'm going to say no to them because I'm saying yes to Him. And you do this, that you're taking up your cross and you're following me. It's sacrifice language. It's sacrificing what otherwise may be my preferences and desires and my druthers and all of those things. I say that's going to take a back seat because I'm following Him. And then he says this, and whoever doesn't take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. And he gives that language in verse 37, again, talking about the love of father and mother, the love of son or daughter. That my love for him is to be greater for him than for these others. Where is this going? Where he's talking about this sacrifice language. Let me just put it very plainly. It is possible. I'm not saying that it's likely. I'm not saying that it has happened in your life, but I'm saying that it could happen. Maybe it is happening. Perhaps it has happened. But if you are in a relationship with the Lord, it could be that there are those in your family that do not share that relationship or are so separated and so wandering from God that they are over here. And there is this tug. There is this pulling, and they want you to be over here with them. And you have to decide this. Either I am going to be with them or I'm going to be following Him. And Jesus says, if He has the place that He is supposed to have, if I love Him the way that I should, that's going to answer this question. With whom will I stand? The answer is Jesus every single time, even if that means I cannot stand with my family. Now listen, I understand that this is tough, but it's also possible that we could leave this in a very theoretical level and that we could just talk about a ethereal type of notions. But let's take it from 30,000 feet down to real life and to real circumstances. One of the things that families, and especially where you have parents that are committed followers of Jesus, that is really becoming a dilemma is this. What do I do as a mom or a dad when I have a son or a daughter that is making decisions, choosing to do things that God has forbidden? Specifically with some of these issues related to same-sex attraction, same-sex even marriage. What do I do then if I have a son or a daughter that is engaged in this relationship? What do I do when my son or a daughter is even, quote, married to a person of the same sex? All of this that God has expressly forbidden. So God has shown where He is, and I know where they are, and my son, my daughter is saying to me, listen, if you want a relationship with me, well, then it comes with this. And if you want a relationship with me, then that's going to mean you affirm this. What do you do? Does it mean that you stop loving them? Does it mean that you hate them? But it does mean this. If standing with them means that I affirm what God has put out of bounds, I will not do it. I will not do it. Because I don't answer to my son. I don't answer to my daughter. I answer to Him. And as a product of following Him, because He has the spot that He is supposed to have in my life, He's got the best spot in the whole parking lot of all the relationships that I have. A way that I can tell that I feel for Him the way that I should is that if I have to choose between affirming and walking with someone that's not walking with Him, as much as it grieves me, as much as it breaks my heart, I'm sticking with Jesus. Now, sometimes the stakes are a little less, comparatively significantly less. One of the things that absolutely is competing for the minds and the hearts and the time and the attention of families is recreational stuff, and especially sports that are seeking to occupy so much time. And it's not that sports are bad, that sports or that athletics are a problem at all, but so many times what is occurring is that there is so much pressure for your child to be involved in this, to be separated from God's church, to be completely removed from that so that you can be absorbed by that. And you say, you know what, as pleasant as those things are, as much benefit, as much health benefit as there is that comes from this, listen, ultimately I am standing with God and His church, and there's nothing that is going to trump that. And if I can say that, if I can say there is no person, that there is no thing that gets that top spot, that helps answer the question as to whether or not I feel for Him the way that I should. Understand this, love absolutely involves feelings. It certainly involves feelings, but it always, when it is real, when it is present, translates itself into action. And if the love that I have for God is what it should be, if He has the primary relationship in my life that it should be, with whom will I stand? The answer is always. It doesn't make any difference what Mama says, what Daddy says, what Junior says, what friend says, what coach says, what anybody else says. With whom will I stand? I will stand with Him no matter what. What does this look like? John Bunyan may be a name that you're familiar with. If you are, it's probably because of him having been the author of the book Pilgrim's Progress. And Bunyan was operating in the early to mid 17th century, so he's back in the 1600s. Elsa used to teach him in Vacation Bible School. But anyway, Bunyan was a Puritan preacher. And at this point in English history, it is very difficult for the Puritans because of the message they are preaching. And it is a fidelity to the gospel, it is a salvation by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, to the glory of God alone. And as they are teaching this, Bunyan runs afoul of English authorities such that he is told he can either stop preaching or he can go to prison. And so he decided, I'm going to go to prison. In prison, he wrote this. And just for clarity's sake, I have smoothed out some of the these, thous, and arts so that you get what he says. He said, parting with my wife and poor children. Now keep in mind, he had 6 kids. Parting with my wife and poor children to be in this place, that's prison, has felt like pulling the flesh off of my bones. In part, this has been because I have thought of the many hardships, miseries, and wants that my poor family was likely to experience should I be taken from them. So life was tough when I was at home. It's that much worse now. He says, especially for my poor blind child, who is especially dear to my heart. Oh, the thought of the hardship I have thought my blind child might experience breaks my heart to pieces. But yet, I remember this. I must venture all with God. Though it cuts me to the quick to be separated from my family, I felt like a man who is pulling down his house on the head of his wife and children, yet I thought this, I must do it. I must do it. Why? Because when the choice is, do I stand with Him, even if that means standing at odds with family, I choose every single time I'm standing with Him. If the answer to that is no, based on what Jesus says, I want to communicate to you something very simple. There is a place in your heart and life that is reserved for God, and you put something else in that place. And that what you put in that place doesn't have to be bad. Doesn't have to be something harmful to you. It can be even something good. It can even be something like your family. But understand this, even that which is good is ultimately not God. Is it possible that you have allowed even family into His place? The encouragement is not to quit loving your family, but to get things realigned so that He has the top spot in your heart and in your life, because anything else, even if it's family, it's an idol. Will you bow your heads with me?